So I'm the founder and executive director of Gistory. Gistory is a new startup that aims to provide complete, concise, and contextual news information. We went live last week, so I would like to say we're still in the womb. At Gistory, we believe that in order to know news better, you need to know the context to a news story and to understand where on the map the event or the news is unfolding. I'm just going to give you a little backstory about how I came about founding Gistory. I was born and raised in Mumbai, and I moved to Columbia, Missouri for my undergrad. So I've been living between Columbia, Mumbai, and several other cities for the past 6 years. And no matter where I am, I talk to my parents. My parents are artists by profession, but I must say that's where their similarities end. My father is very engaged with the news. He keeps updated with what's happening around the world. My mother, on the other hand, she believes that talking about politics kills her creativity. So, she's not really engaged with the news at all. But no matter whenever I call them, we always end up talking about the news or a news event that's happening. And my father and me are always on the same page. We talk about a news story in depth, and after we finish discussing the entire event, my mother will always interject and ask me, but how did it start? And this is a question that I've been asked several times, not just by my mother, but several other people in my social circle. Being a journalist, people expect me to have an answer to that question. And so I identified three major things because of which people are not able to follow the news. One was the lack of understanding the context, not knowing the backstory of a news event. We're living in a globalized age where we're not just surrounded by local and national news stories, but we're inundated by international news stories also. And it's impossible to follow every news story in detail. Also, we have very limited time, and so we don't have enough time to go and find that depth or that context. Lastly, not knowing where an event is actually happening on the map, not knowing where that event is unfolding, is also an impediment for us knowing the news better and understanding what is actually happening. So I identified these three main concerns, and in order to address those main concerns, I came up with the tagline, complete, concise, and contextual. These were three main things, if addressed, could help people engage with the news better. So if you provided news that was complete, that was brief, and provided the context to people, it would be easier for them to follow what is happening today. And so that was what inspired me to start Gistory. I'm going to tell you more about how I actually went about executing it. So at that time when I was thinking about Gistory, I was working as a fellow at Jazeera English in D.C. And I was contemplating whether I wanted to come back to grad school, which I'd actually quit because I was not interested in school, and whether I wanted to continue working. And at that time, I received an email from Professor Jim Flink. He told me about a class that he was offering about emerging technologies. And he said that this is something that I should look into. I'd always been interested in innovation and entrepreneurship. And those are two things that had really driven my passion for journalism. And I looked at what he had sent me, and I knew that this is a class that I would be interested in. And so I told him, I said, I think I want to come back to school on the condition that I won't do any coursework that you offer in your class. I won't take the exams, I won't do the tests, but instead, I want to work on this startup. I have this idea, and I'm really excited about trying to make this happen. But I promise you, at the end of the semester, you'll have a product that you can evaluate. And he agreed. He was on board, so I actually took his class and didn't do any coursework.
Yes, you did.
And so at that point of time, in my head, I knew what I wanted Gistory to be. I knew that I wanted news on a map so that people could actually see where the news is happening. I knew that my target audience was going to be between 16 to 45, a global audience that was cross-cultural. I also knew Gistory had to be accessible across platforms. It had to be responsive on different devices. And lastly, I wanted the users to be the center of Gistory. I wanted the content to come from the users. I wanted to make citizen journalism mainstream. And the content is actually a central part of Gistory. I knew that I wanted the language of Gistory, the tone of it, to be really simple and conversational. The language that everyone can follow. You don't need a dictionary in order to look up a word. The story briefs need to be very brief. And local sources is another important feature that I identified as being important to Gistory. There's so much amazing local news reporting happening out there, but we're not aware about all the local sources. And so if we could link those local sources in our story brief and provide a platform, people would be aware of all the other journalists that are working. And as I mentioned before, geolocation, that was an important feature, knowing where the news is happening on the map. So I had these ideas, and I knew what Gistory would look like. But the two main questions was that how was I going to make this happen? And what about Gistory? How can I include these features so that people choose Gistory or come to Gistory over all the other digital media organizations that are out there? And I knew in order to get started, the first very important thing is that I needed funding. I needed resources. So I came back to university where I had access to resources and funding. The second important thing was to figure out how I was going to get this content. We went live. I didn't even have people to help me build the site. But I needed to figure out how I was going to get people interested in this concept so that users can already start contributing, so that we can start building the site. The third important part was trying to assemble a team that would help me bring this vision to life. And lastly is creating a brand and an identity for Gistory that would resonate with our target audience. I wanted to make news attractive. And so in order to do that, so I started working on Gistory in September 2014. At that point of time, we were just 4 of us. It was me, Avery, who was helping me with the design, Femi and Alex, who were helping me build the website. In Professor Jim Flink's class, I successfully built a prototype, and I presented to Randy Picht. And he was really happy with what we had achieved, and we received our initial funding. After that, I put together a team of 10 people, which now form Gistory's core team. These were students I had met in class, I had worked with, I had heard about them, and I convinced them to be a part of the startup. And together, we formed Gistory's core team, and we're involved in different aspects of Gistory's engagement. I'm going to hand it over to Avery, who's the director of visual design. She's going to talk more specifically about building a brand and identity for Gistory.
So, as Zahra mentioned, my aspect of engagement is visual identity and anything you look at, basically. So news in itself isn't inherently visual, it's verbal. But if you can add visuals to the verbal, you can create much more engagement. And so Zahra said, I want you to look at sites like the New York Times that are very trusted and reliable. And I want you to also look at sites like BuzzFeed and Mashable that have huge digital followings that are popular, and things like Twitter that people flock to share and engage with their friends. And she also stressed that the most important thing that I need to keep in mind is that it's the form that's driving this. At Gistory, we want to break out of the box of verbal news. So, like I said, news isn't visual, but the internet is visual. So if you can somehow find a way to make news work like the internet works, you can unleash a whole new dimension that we haven't seen so far. And that's what we want to do with the globe. So on a map, if you can display news in a visual way that gives people that extra context to see where it's happening, what's happening, when it's happening, and who's involved, you can draw connections in a way that isn't possible if you're just reading things page by page in a physical newspaper or page by page on a news website. So really, news isn't even what we should be calling it anymore. It's not an applicable term for this, so what should we call it? We got together and made a big list of different terms that we felt we were drawn to for this concept, because when Zahra contacted me, we didn't even have a name. So we pulled together things like GIS and history and the gist of the story to get Gistory. So we're not news, we're Gistory. And I created a logo as well as a color palette optimized for screen. And then in combination with the tagline, "No news better," these elements combine to form every foundational block that, that any visual for Gistory has been built on, from this presentation to our social media posts and to our design itself. But you can have all of the visuals in the world and nothing to do with them if you don't have an audience. So I'm handing it over to Katie now.
Hi, so I am the Director of Audience Development and Engagement for Gistory, and so kind of the challenge was, first we have to build this audience, we have to get people to come to our site, get people interested, and then figure out, so how do we engage with them? How do we keep them here, and how do we keep them coming back to Gistory? So kind of when we were thinking about it, I thought about our target demographic and a couple of things that we already know about them. They're not only looking at the news on their desktop or their laptop, they're really looking on mobile, they're looking on tablets, they're using a variety of different devices to access information. We also know that they're avid social media users. They use a variety of different platforms, and they use it near daily, and each platform serves a little bit of a different purpose. We also thought about, people want their time to be used efficiently. They don't maybe have a lot of time to, kind of get this information. And then we also know that people really like visually driven posts and visually driven content. So taking all these things into consideration when launching the brand and kind of leading up to the launch of Gistory, I created a 4-step strategy with 4 different areas that we promoted on social media. The first was we introduced the brand, so who is Gistory, what is our voice, and what can you really expect from us? The second was transparency, so who's behind that orange G, and a little bit more about our company. The third was anticipation, so we wanted people to remember, hey, we're here, we're launching soon, don't forget about us, come check us out when we're live. And then once we went live, we posted content graphics, so information that is found in our story briefs and then directs people back to our website to view those story briefs. So this is one of the first examples. I think this is a really great example of our voice. So it combines this infographic. It shows them a little bit. You can get geographic context as well as type of news stories there. Previews our format a little bit, and then it's paired with a witty one-liner at the top. And we thought that this combination of a visually popping infographic with this witty one-liner would help us stand out on a news feed where we might not get noticed, make people interested, make people excited and want to come check us out. The second is transparency. So we did a series called Meet the Team, and what we did is we took everyone's pictures, we put them on graphics, we put their hometown, their role at Gistory, and then in the post we put kind of a 1 or 2 sentence bit about who they are as a person. This is just, this was to kind of show people who we are behind that orange G, but it also helped our brand awareness when we tagged people in it on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Their networks also saw that they were tagged, and it helped expose Gistory to a greater amount of people. During this phase, we also posted articles by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and by the Missouri School of Journalism about our company. The third, this is one example of our anticipation graphic, and so we posted these types of things reminding people, hey, we have a couple more days, we're launching tomorrow, etc. Come check us out, don't forget. We also, too, during this time, we started receiving a lot of attention on social, so people would tweet at us, comment on Facebook, tag us in things, and so we took this opportunity to start direct engagement and to start building those relationships with our audience so that they come, and then once Gistory launches, they're loyal users. The fourth, so our content just launched this past week. This is one example of a graphic that we posted. We have a brief on the Boston Olympics debate, and so this showcases what you can find in that brief, as well as, it catches people's attention. It's the Olympic rings. And so we use that, we posted it on social to direct people back to our site. And we got a lot of feedback from that as well. We've gotten, not only tweets and Facebook posts, but we've gotten emails, kind of about our product. People are excited. We had a post go viral on Tumblr the other day, and somebody who was really interested in maps said, hey, where has this been all my life? So we have been getting some really great feedback with social as of so far. And I'm going to turn this back to Avery.
So as Katie mentioned, we are on multiple social platforms. We built the site to be fully responsive to different device platforms. So we built it so it looks just as good on a desktop, as a laptop, as an iPad, as an iPhone. and we were correct in that we assumed people would be coming from all three of those. We had 66% of users come from desktop in our first week, 27 from mobile, and 7 from tablet. But like we mentioned, we've only been live for 1 week, so we have a lot of plans for the future.
So part of our future plans, actually, we want to expand our social engagement. Currently on the website, all our briefs are text-based. We want to include more multimedia content in our briefs and also in our social. Another thing we really want to do is streamline the process for contributors so that it reduces the work editors have to do in order to correct for grammar and tone, and it also gives contributors guidelines. So while they are writing these briefs to submit to us, they're already thinking about Gistory's identity and Gistory's voice. Lastly, I think we need to continue evolving the site's features. We've had multiple iterations of our website already. We have a lot of challenges that we already foresee that are already facing us. Like, for example, we're still trying to decide how we want to organize our articles. Do we want to do it based on region, based on country, based on city? What if there's an article, what if there are multiple pins for an article? How are we going to show that on our map? These are challenges that we are excited to face because we have the ability to experiment, innovate, and most of all, break the rules. And you can find us on different social media platforms, but since we're based out of the school, we're lucky because a lot of the people that are working on Gistory stuff are actually present here. So I'm going to call them on stage so that if you'll have any questions, you can direct it directly at them.
Femi, Alex, Brian, Nassim, who else is in the room? Come on up.
Yeah, some people aren't there, somebody's traveling, but part of our team. And also, I cannot end without thanking 3 people in this room, one who actually left. Firstly, Professor Jim Flink, without whose mentorship and guidance, we would absolutely not be here. Gistory's vision wouldn't have come true without the guidance he's given us. Secondly is Rami Khetar from Jazeera English. He has supported us despite all the challenges, and he doesn't give up. So we're very grateful for him. And to Randy Picht, who gave us our first funding for Gistory. So thank you.
Good. Questions for the Gistory team, and if you want to pull up the website, it is gistory.co. Gistory.co. Okay, Harsh.
So you mentioned that it's, firstly, congratulations. I think it's a great achievement to start as a class project. I'm very interested in, you talk about it, you envision it as a cross-cultural, sort of geography-neutral platform. But, you know, looking at news audiences or web audiences in general for a long time, I find that geography and localness are a very real thing on the web, and they are not going away. So do you envision Gistory evolving into a global yet local platform in the future? And sort of just to go a little bit more into detail here, so currently, like when I looked at your site, you have stories from all parts of the world. But if these are being contributed by users, news about floods in Kashmir in India, from a US perspective, probably means a very different headline from a South Asian perspective. So how do you sort of envision with these issues the global-local dilemma? Thank you.
Yeah. Those are great questions, and those are questions that we continue to answer every single day. Addressing your first part, we envision Gistory is replacing Wikipedia for news. Currently, a lot of us still go to Wikipedia in order to get the context of the news, in order to get the history, to get a short brief, and Wikipedia hasn't been an impediment. I mean, you know, they include that, and we still all go there. So we're hoping we can fill that void. Secondly, in terms of the contributions, we really want our contributions to come from the people. So if there's somebody who submits a brief about Kashmir floods from the US and somebody who submits the brief about Kashmir floods from Kashmir, we're definitely going to go with the person who submitted from Kashmir because they're going to be able to provide us links to local sources. And also, we believe that their knowledge or information about that issue would be slightly more nuanced than somebody who is based in the US, unless that the US person is actually a reporter that's specializing in the region. So.
Should note that dozens of volunteers across the globe have volunteered to be contributors to Gistory, just so you know. Other questions? Well, there went the buzzer. Oh, hang on. Go ahead, Alice.
I'm interested that you said you want to replace Wikipedia for news. How are you vetting the information if you're having contributors from around the globe? How are you going to make sure it's accurate?
We hope we can replace Wikipedia. It's an ambitious goal, you know. Well, we have to start somewhere. So when people submit these briefs, they have to give us links to at least 3 local sources, and all 3 local sources have to be different. So then when it comes to our editors, we actually go through the sources that they've given us, verify the news, make sure that the news is authentic and it's not made up and the sources are not made up, and only then does it go onto our website. So our editors do have the final say in the matter. So we hope through, and this process is not foolproof, but we are trying to make it better to ensure that every news piece that goes there is accurate and authentic.
I can expand a bit on this. Yeah, like creating a system where people can join and become contributors just by registering on the site is definitely something we've been talking about a lot. We're thinking of kind of establishing a hierarchy where, you know, we have your entry contributors, and then you have a trusted contributors, and then finally, you know, the admins, the others, us. And so the idea would be that they would submit their, you know, gists, and the readers can judge it themselves. For instance, they could, there could be 2 things, like they got the gist and they click it, yeah, I got it. Or there's like something's misleading, like a big red frowny face or something like that, and then they report it. And then if this contributor has too many misleading, you know, statements against them, then yeah, he shouldn't be trusted. But if a contributor, you know, is constantly giving people the good gist, then he should rise up. And so the idea is definitely something we're exploring, the various ways that we can establish a hierarchy for people to join and contribute. Because ultimately, once you have like 10,000 people, a lot of people are going to have to want to write on the same thing. Like, there's going to be competition for it. And so there needs to be someone who moderates that, and also, you know, all the other people interested in it. So definitely something in progress.